I suck at jiu-jitsu. How do I suck less at jiu-jitsu?
I guess to suck less.
The diabolical leader of the Headlock Squad.
All right, Stephan, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Josh. Thanks so much for having me on.
Yeah, man, I'm really excited to have you on and get to have this conversation. As I told you, I just finished reading the sneak peek of the book, and I have a lot of questions based on it, but I really think that the most important question for anyone who is married, when we look at this, and we'll talk deeply about what is on this book, but how in the world could one sell to their new wife? I believe you had been married for a day. How do you sell hey, honey, I want to go on a 6-week kayaking trip and try to survive by myself?
Well, this is why you train jiu-jitsu, to survive those conversations. Otherwise, you're going to end up with a kitchen knife in the side of your head. But it's, the truth is, the truth is, I'm not qualified to give relationship advice. I know this is a podcast. I know I'm a jiu-jitsu black belt, but people should stay in their lanes. And, in terms of relationship advice, I'm probably not the guy you want to go to. But I will say this, because again, it's a podcast. And by definition, everyone on a podcast knows everything about every topic.
You're an expert in anything.
Give the disclaimer. Yeah. Well, a couple of divorces have taught me something. And that is that one of the most important things that you can have in a relationship is a willingness to support the other person in their goals and their willingness to support you in your goals. And it doesn't need to be the same thing necessarily. It's obviously the more things you have in common, the better. But you don't have to spend every moment cheek by jowl. Mm-hmm. You can if you want to, but you don't have to. And if one person's goal is, I don't know, to watch every episode of Lost 3 times in a row, and then really get into the trivia of Lost and spend all their time on a Lost Reddit talking about what does the polar bear mean. I think there was a polar bear in it. This is what it came across my radar. I never watched it. Great. It doesn't mean you necessarily need to do the same thing. If your passion is jiu-jitsu or kiteboarding or skiing, it's okay. And I'll buy you the Lost Blu-ray compilation and a membership to, I don't know, the Lost Mastermind, this, high level thing where $1,000 a year you can talk to the producer of the show, and I can go and off to snowboard or do jiu-jitsu, whatever, that's fine. So finding somebody who's willing to support your goals. Now, I had been talking about doing this trip for a couple of years, and I had a departure date set, right? The departure date was going to be June 31st, 2019. And I'd been dating my wife, and we ended up getting engaged in December, or Christmas Day of 2018. So 6 months before the trip started. And we had our departure day, we had our wedding day set, we had our wedding venue set. We lost the venue. They double booked us. We really wanted to do it. It was kind of an outside setting in the forest, kind of a Midsummer Night's Dream kind of area. And the only other day that the venue had available was the day before I would left on my trip. So we had a conversation. I said, should I move the trip? She said, no, go ahead. Stick with the plan. She knew how much it meant to me. I'd been planning for this trip either for a couple of years or by some measures for 25 years. So we got married, and then 24 hours later, I was leaving on a plane to go off and try and trek across the Canadian Arctic I had food for 50 days. I thought it would take about 50 days. It ended up taking about 42 days. So I got a bit ahead of schedule. And so that was my solo moon following the marriage. And we did our honeymoon some other time. So yeah, I'm lucky. I don't think the vast majority of, I was about to say brides, brides or grooms would put up with that kind of shit.
Yeah.
But it took a couple of marriages to find the right one. So there, I don't know if that's advice or if that's just a story about how I managed to pull this off. And it's amazing how many people glom onto that. When I wrote this book, I thought people glom onto, like, I don't know, the bear encounters or the whitewater or the this or the that. But more than one person has gone, okay, we got to get one thing out of the way. How the hell did you manage this? So, yeah.
I mean, I'll tell you this. I told my wife that I was going to interview you. I told her about the book, and then I said, yeah, he went on this 6-week Arctic journey, and it was the day after his wedding, and my wife was mad at me about it. And so I don't, I don't know, man. That was yeah. The only other question that I had on it was like, man, I wonder if she took out some type of insurance policy as a just in case, like that might be the move.
More than one training partner asked me about that, and they thought it was how much money did she have you insured for?
I think that's a great question.
Yeah. The answer is none that I know of. So I'm sorry to disappoint you, and I'm sorry to disappoint her if she actually did take out this giant policy on my ass.
So something else that I noted that wasn't what was actually written was how obviously well, the journey, the book is broken down by day, how well the note-taking process for you was done. And I was just curious as one, I like the simple parts of it. It's like, what were you writing with? What were you writing on? And then just more like kind of deeper on it. When you are, I mean, you're having, like you said, you're having bear encounters. You're having situations like that. Is this something that you're writing a couple days later, or is this something that it was just part of your process each day that you were taking notes on how the journey was going?
Well, it was a pretty difficult journey. Like I was going as long and as hard as I could each day. In the beginning, my body could only sustain about 8 hours, maybe 10 hours of paddling. Because I had a long distance to cover. I had a limited amount of food. I would eventually run out of food. And also at the far end of it, by the time you get up to Hudson Bay coast in the Arctic, the storms really start coming fast and furious once you get into late August, early September. And you don't want to be pinned down on the Hudson Bay coast by a 5-day storm, which could very easily happen. So there was a strong incentive to go as fast as I could. So I didn't take any, I had a couple of books on my iPhone in Kindle, but I didn't take a guitar. I didn't take a fishing rod. I didn't take a watercolor set or an extensive music library, because the focus had to be on traveling. So the one luxury I did allow myself at the end of each day was taking notes. And also I had brought a satellite dish, which is about, I don't know, the size of a nice hefty book here. This book by Robert Drysdale, The Rise and Evolution of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. About that big, a little bit heavier because it's got a battery in it. And for $1,000 a gigabyte, can connect to one satellite in the sky. It's a satellite just above the horizon, and you have to kind of dial it in until it points directly at the satellite, and then you can transmit data at dial-up speeds. Now, half your audience won't even know what dial-up speeds are. Very, very, very half a bar of internet. There, that's your comparable. And so I would upload some photos from that day, heavily compressed photos, and I would also write a fairly detailed description, and that just got posted on my Instagram and my Facebook. And that way I could share the journey. I could share the journey with my friends. I could share the journey with the people who followed me. Also to my family, my kids, they could kind of see what was going on. Also, I figured that if I lost everything on the rapids, if I lost my camera, if I lost my phone, if that all got lost or destroyed, I'd still have some memory of the trip because it had been uploaded onto the internet and would live there. So that was my one distraction. So at the end of the day, I would kind of take stock of the day and write fairly detailed notes, some for those posts and some for me. And then I would upload them. Also, I did a fair amount of video during that trip, and I'm releasing some of that now. During how I was feeling, what was going on, and lots of photos. So if you go through every single photo, I have a pretty good memory when it comes to spatial orientation, and that helps obviously on the ground because you can, oh yeah, my arm goes here, and then your foot goes there, and then my hand goes on the inside of your Achilles, and now we do this other weird thing. So I've got a fairly good spatial sense. So looking at the photos, looking at the maps, looking at the notes I took, looking at the notes I posted online, I could recreate the landscape in my mind. And recreating the landscape in the mind brought the stories forward. I'm not saying that's a mnemonic. Mnemonic's the wrong word. A mental cue that'll work for everyone, but it worked for me.
Did you
also, I mean, to be fair, there's a fair bit of stuff in that book that's not just about the trip itself. That a lot of it's sort of thinking about the development of things like grit, like endurance, like perseverance. The places that's gone in the past has been my blog at Grapple Arts. It's several thousand articles there. Some of them are about how to armbar somebody better, and some of them are a little bit more philosophical, a little bit more process oriented. And those more philosophical, more process oriented writings also made their way into the book, not as accounts of what happened, but kind of trying to put those accounts together with something more than just, in the morning I woke up, then I paddled all day long, then I was really tired and went to bed. Like, that's important. That forms a backbone. But what do we put on that backbone to make it more than just a day by day or hour by hour narrative? Because that tends to be boring.
Mm-hmm. This episode is brought to you by Datsusara. So something that I care about very deeply is when I buy something, when I take my hard-earned money and I actually make a purchase, I really want either the information that I get to be timeless or the product that I get to last forever. And in today's day, those things are almost unheard of. Most products that you buy, most products that you get in your hands, they're going to be replaced by version 2.0 next year, or they're going to break in hopes that you'll buy a new one next year. And Datsusara is so on the opposite side of that. Datsusara has literally the best gym bags in the jiu-jitsu space, and it's not even close. They use a hemp blend that is antimicrobial. What that means is it's not going to stink, and even if it started to, all you would need is a little bit of air and a little bit of sunshine, and that smell would be gone because of the antimicrobial properties of hemp. Also, on top of it, they use the best zippers that you can put on a backpack and some of the most durable materials that you can put on a backpack. They built this bag in hopes that you will never have to purchase another bag again. And since Datsusara loves the I Suck at Jiu-Jitsu show, they have a really cool coupon code for you guys. If you use coupon code ISUCK at checkout, you will get 10% off your entire order for any of their products, not just their bags. They have bags, they have gis, they have, I told you guys before, they have chopsticks. They have all kinds of really cool products at Datsusara. It's at dsgear.com. And so if that is interesting to you, be sure to check them out. Be sure to use your promo code ISUCK and get in on one of these bags that is gonna last you a lifetime. You use your gym bag more than you use any individual gi, more than you use almost any other product for jiu-jitsu. Why not purchase something that's gonna last forever, that is functional as could be, and literally designed for a jiu-jitsu enthusiast like yourself? Let's get back to the episode. And that's something that I definitely noticed. Obviously, it was linear in a sense that there was each day, but it didn't feel linear in the explanation. And something I was wondering was, like you said, you're paddling 8 to 10 hours a day And, you know, like often in jujitsu, we're talking about like, oh, you're trying to reach a flow state when you are doing jujitsu. And it made me wonder, are you, when you're paddling 8 to 10 hours a day, where are your thoughts at? Are you kind of feeling that flow state, or are you like, man, I would really like to not be paddling right now, or I would really like if I could enjoy this scene a little more? Like, what is kind of, obviously, I'm asking you to give me your thoughts on an 8 to 10 hour window, but what is kind of, how is your mind working, especially after a week or two when you're really getting into this and you're really like, you know, finding your groove in this?
Well, there's a fair amount of analogies to jiu-jitsu here. I mean, when somebody starts jiu-jitsu, for the first 2 to 3 months, they're completely lost. You can explain it verbally to them all they want, all you want, and they'll kind of understand it intellectually, but they won't get it. And there's a shift that happens about the 2 to 3 month mark where they're like, oh, I still might not be able to do these things very well, but at least I understand what's going on. For me in the outdoors, there's a big shift that happens at about the 5 to 7 day mark where all of a sudden it's not weird to wake up in a tent anymore. It's not weird to be traveling all day and then to make camp, cook some food, go to bed, wake up and do it the next day. So there's a big shift that happens there. And obviously your body adapts as well. By the end of that trip, I was still in as much pain as I was in the first couple of days. The difference is I was now paddling for 12 to 14 hours a day. It was initially all I could do was 8 hours. And initially all I could do was 20 to 30 minutes of paddling and I had to rest. By the end, I could go for an hour, take a 5 minute break, go for another hour, take another 5 minute break. And so your body adapts just like it does for anything. In terms of thoughts, that's interesting. We can talk about flow states in jiu-jitsu, but the reality is most of the time when you're rolling around on the ground, you're going, oh shit, that guy's foot just went on my hip. Okay, I got to do, I know what he's doing now. He's beginning to shift. Is he faking? Is he faking his hip movement here to get me to react? I'm going to stand up and I'm going to pretend to go for an ankle. He's going to pull his foot back. Then I'm going to go to a stack pass or whatever. Occasionally we reach moments of flow in there, usually during a faster paced exchange where there is no time to think and there's just that time to react. And those are beautiful moments, right? We all live for those moments where the guy does one thing and you just instinctively react and pull off some fantastic move. And we think about those and we go home and we're still glowing about that one, I don't know, that one bolo to the back to the bow and arrow choke that we just hit or whatever. So the reality is on a long canoe trip, most of your procedural mind is, especially if it's a difficult trip, most of your procedural mind is spent thinking, oh man, my hand's beginning to hurt. Have I strained that wrist? I should shift my position here. When's the last time I ate? Should I go to the left or the right of that island, given that the wind is coming from the west? But by the time I get there, it'll be afternoon. Maybe the wind will have shifted and I'll be close to land if I go on this other side. And look at how those waves are changing shape. And where should I camp tonight? Let me look at the map again. And most of your mind is spent dealing with the minutia of travel. And that's partially to stay safe because it's not an intrinsically safe environment, which brings up interesting questions about risk. And I spent a lot of time thinking about mitigating risk and what risk am I willing to take. So you do reach flow states occasionally. I tend to reach them in whitewater, right? Where all of a sudden you forget about the pain in your body and you're just reacting. You don't have time to often you don't have time to think long, complicated, strategic things. You've got, there's a giant rock there and I have to react now. And then you react based on days or weeks or months or years of other paddling. Same as in jiu-jitsu, when that guy goes for that armbar, you may end up in a static position where you have time to think. But most of the time, hopefully, you're just going to react based on all that other training that you've done. So the interesting thing is by occupying the mind with all this tons of procedural detail and occupying the body with tons of repetitive work. In one case, it's paddling 20 or 30,000 paddle strokes a day. I think it frees up some space at a deeper level to like process and begin to churn through some other issues that you might be dealing with. In my case, it was a brush with death. It was mortality, because I did this trip kind of as a big FU to nearly dying a few years before from kidney failure, right? I did have a genetic condition that shut down my kidneys. I got a kidney transplant from my brother that saved my life. It's sobering. I mean, I knew I would probably survive the surgery. Like most people survive surgeries, although things go wrong all the time. But what degree of function would I get back? Would I be able to get back to the mat? I had no idea. Would I be able to go for a moderately strenuous walk? I didn't know. Would I be able to go back to firefighting? Would I be able to go back into the woods? I had no idea. And when you spend so much of your life doing physical things and it begins to define you, and it can create a crisis of meaning, right? What if I can't do this stuff anymore? Who am I then? What do I do now? So, as it turns out, modern medicine's amazing. I'm alive now. I wouldn't have been alive 50 years ago, or 100 years ago, or 1,000 years ago. Profoundly grateful to modern medicine. I'm profoundly grateful for the drugs that I take to keep me going. The pharmaceutical drugs, I should just emphasize, this is jiu-jitsu. It'd be very easy for people to draw the wrong conclusion of what I just said. He realizes. I very grateful to be able to get back to living in my body and doing challenging things that have challenged the mind and the body at the same time, because those are really the things that get me going.
Did it, obviously giving someone a kidney is a very big thing.
Yes.
Has your relationship with your brother, because I know you dedicated the book to him amongst a few other people, but has your relationship with your brother changed since then? Like since he kept you alive?
Yes, it has. I mean, there's an immense debt of gratitude there, and it really shows you who you can rely on when push comes to shove. I have some other friends who went and got tested as well, and that made me incredibly grateful to know that there were people out there who were willing to go do that. Some of them only told me afterwards, like, yeah, we just wanted you to have a backup in case this thing with your brother didn't go ahead. So that is humbling, and it points to something that, you nominally we're talking about mostly today, a solo trip I did, but it wasn't really a solo trip, right? There were other people involved in that. Without my brother giving me his bloody kidney, there is no trip, there's no book, there's no me. Without the infrastructure, without my wife being willing to let me go, I probably wouldn't have gone. So, without her sending me updates via a little tiny satellite communications device, that really helped. Without my kids sort of endorsing this, that is part of my team out there when I'm out there completely alone. I'm not completely alone. Ultimately, if I break a leg, there is an infrastructure in place in a way that there wasn't 200 years ago, where I can get on my satellite communicator and maybe talk to a doctor and get a float plane to come out and pick me up. It might take a couple of days. They might not be able to fly, but hopefully I'll be able to get picked up. And so there is a network of safety built in. We do, it is part of the risk assessment. It's very different to train jiu-jitsu as hard as we do in an environment where there is no orthopedic surgery. Imagine trying to train leg locks without there being an ACL reconstruction option. We all hope you don't tear your ACL, but it's a possibility.
Mhm.
And tearing your ACL in the pre-industrial world is a pretty serious thing, right? If you got to walk for 20 miles a day to go gather chestnuts or whatever it is that you do, and now you can't walk anymore, right? You might starve to death.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not, obviously, going into massive medical debt is a problem, especially in the States. I live in Canada, so the situation is quite different there. The only money out of pocket for my kidney transplant was the parking at the hospital, which I like $20 for 3 hours. I thought was ruinous. Ruinous, I tell you. But
Man,
I mean,
that's
in
criminal
the grand
that they would
scheme of
do you
things,
like that.
Yeah. Yeah. In the grand scheme of things, it's not an awful lot of money, really. I just remember bitching and moaning about that, and then, slapping some sense into myself. So knowing that there is a layer of safety beyond you is a very important thing. And knowing that, there are medical options if something goes terribly wrong, that's important. And having a communications infrastructure and having a transportation infrastructure, all these things are things that being out there really makes you realize, and you stop taking things for granted. You really begin appreciating the fact that there is search and rescue out there. I've never had to call them, thank God, but if I had to, it'd be awfully nice. It's awfully nice to know that there is that option, and that it's not necessarily going to force you to declare bankruptcy.
When and you had said already that the reason, or a big reason for this was the brush with death. But when you decided and you went on this trip, if you had to put it in jiu-jitsu terms and say what belt rank you were as an explorer, as a survivalist, as whatever we would call it, what belt rank would that be? Where would you put yourself? Obviously, white belt being someone who's never, ever, been in the wilderness before. And then black belt being, I don't know, Bear Grylls. Maybe he's a black belt. I said that's the best off the top of my head.
Bear Grylls is a bit of a fraud. There's this amazing video out there. If you
don't ruin this for me.
No, there's all kinds of accounts of him going out, building a shelter, and then jumping in the helicopter, going to stay at the lodge overnight. And then they go back in the morning. He's like crawling out of the shelter. Or if you want, there's a footage of him crossing this lava bridge, right? Where he's like jumping. These bridges can collapse. And I've seen the only way across. Yeah. And then another guy finds the place, and there's like a highway right beside it. And he just walks across it. That's pretty funny.
Okay, here we go. Les Stroud.
Okay, very nice. Very nice.
Right.
Survivor Man.
All right, yeah, Survivor Man. That's a black belt, right?
Yeah.
So give me your belt rank as an explorer before you left, and then did you belt up at all in your 6-week journey? Hey guys, Josh here. So there is a problem for jiu-jitsu school owners, and it is this, that there is only one of you. It would be awesome if you had a clone to be able to handle the business side of the gym, so then you could focus on the teaching jiu-jitsu side of the gym. But what a lot of school owners are shocked to find out when they start running their school is you can't just focus on the teaching jiu-jitsu side of the gym. There are so many more aspects to running a gym, and that is where my friends at Kicksite come in. I've used Kicksite for about 8 years now, and one of the biggest things that happened as soon as I started to use Kicksite was that it felt like I got a clone that was able to run a lot of the student management, a lot of the billing, a lot of the communication, a lot of every part of the gym that I was trying to run on my own. And honestly, at the 30, 40, and even 50 student range, I was almost able to run them on my own. But as we started to grow more than that, it was impossible. There was just not enough time for me to be able to deliver the way that I wanted to deliver while advertising, while messing with everybody's billing each month, while trying to communicate, while having a video library. Well, guess what? Kicksite actually solves all of those problems. So if you need a student management software, if you are unhappy with the billing software that you use, well, there is a group of people at Kicksite that do this specifically for martial arts school owners. You're not using some fitness app. You're not using some even broader type of billing app. You are using a group of people in an app that is dedicated to martial arts school owners. And you just will experience it the second that you sign up. If you want to sign up, you can get a 30-day free trial at the link in my description, the description of this episode. It's kicksite.com/Josh McKinney. And I am telling you guys, I promise you guys, you do this 30-day free trial and you will be like, oh my gosh, I wish I did this sooner. It is so much easier to run my school now. It feels like there is now two of me and I can again focus on just teaching jiu-jitsu while Kicksite helps me grow my gym. So be sure to check out Kicksite. Let's get back to the episode. All right,
Yeah,
Survivor Man. That's a black belt, right?
Yeah.
So give me your belt rank as an explorer before you left, and then did you belt up at all in your 6-week journey?
I think the better analogy is a really rusty black belt, because I had actually done a lot of outdoor stuff, especially in my 20s. It's like I did some long solo trips in my 20s, months long. I worked as a canoe guide. I worked as a raft guide. I would go and basically try and spend the summers in the bush, and I'd spend the winters training and doing whatever odd job I could. So I had this like schizophrenic or multiple personality life, kind of like I do now, honestly. And so I had an awful lot of experience. I've run tons of whitewater. It's like the black belt analogy is a good analogy, because not every black belt is equally good in everything. There are some black belts who are amazing at pressure passing, and there are other black belts who are really good at speed-based or motion-based passing. There's some black belts who don't really pass at all, and especially in no-gi, they just go back for a leg lock. So the leg lock guy might not be good at guard passing. The triangle choke specialist may not be good at kimuras. The kimura specialist usually isn't good at any kind of finesse, because they just grab onto the kimura and they hold on and they reef it and reef it and reef it. I'm generalizing here, but it's amazing how often that generalization is true.
Oh, yeah.
So there's different areas that you have to be good at. In sort of the outdoor space, there are different areas you need to be good at. One is, I don't know, foraging. And I'm blue belt at foraging. Then there's whitewater. I'll say black belt at whitewater. Then there's camping. Then there's bear safety. Then there's navigation. Then there's dealing with elements. Then there's, planning, because planning is a big part of it. So I think in the aggregate, I was a black belt, but I hadn't been doing the thing for quite a while. I'd gone out and done some smaller trips. I'd, get out on the weekends. I'd go and do cardio in the hills. It's like somebody who was a serious competitive black belt, then went back down to hobbyist status and trained once or twice a week, and then decided to compete again. So the trouble is, when I started that trip, I decided to compete, but I hadn't had the time. My cardio was good. I had injured both my shoulders, one doing jiu-jitsu. That was stupid of me. I was rolling with a guy who was lighter than me, much less experienced than me, lower rank than me. I was just goofing around. I let him catch me in this weird omoplata type thing. It was actually an omoplata with the wrong leg. It's bizarre. And I was like, I'm not tapping to this. No way. Like, piss off. So I big breath in, big breath out, and just inch out, just a half inch. Big breath in, slip out a little bit more. Big breath in, slip out a little bit more. And I got out. Good for me. But I also jacked my shoulder for the next 9 months. So it's really stupid of me. There's an easy way out, and it's called tapping.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
I've heard of it.
But yeah, I never do it. I don't know about you. I never tap.
I can't even claim that. There's a lot of YouTube videos of me tapping.
Well, yeah. The only person who never taps, as a person who never competes, never spars, or more importantly, never allows YouTube videos to be filmed, because then it's deniable. So I hadn't been doing the thing as much as I wanted to be able to do it before I set off on this insane trip. My logistics skills were pretty good. My medical skills were pretty good. My navigation skills are very good, but my paddling and my physical conditioning was not at all where I wanted it to be. So you know, you make a plan and the plan meets the enemy and it falls apart. So that's what happened. So I'll say I was a really rusty black belt, and by the end of that trip, I was a very seasoned black belt, or a very unrusty, very shiny black belt.
So do you think you'll do another trip like that?
I have. I've done, since that trip, I've done a couple trips with my wife, and a one solo trip. So I did a shorter solo trip last summer in that same region. I wanted to explore a different river, but it had some overlap. So I have been. I think it's I'm very aware that as you get older, eventually there are limitations that your body just places on you. We all look at, and we've all seen like the 70-year-old guy who's still doing jiu-jitsu, or in some cases even 80. And it's so impressive when we see it, right? We go, I'm sure the young punks are going, I could totally smash that 75-year-old black belt. Yeah, you could. Mm-hmm. Good for you. Call each decade functionally takes probably a belt rank off your skill as you can express it on the mat. There must be some kind of relationship there. But we find it, we enjoy seeing, I enjoy seeing old people train. I find it incredibly inspirational. But they can't train as much as they did when they were young. And I enjoy going out in the woods. And I realize that I won't be able to do the real crazy stuff in my 60s and my 70s. There are some people who have, and it's very inspirational. And hopefully I'm that person, but you never know. You're only one serious injury or one serious illness away from not being able to do this stuff that you take for granted. And I think, that was one of the lessons of having the kidney failure, kidney transplant, and then rebirth, is like, man, don't take your health for granted. And I work as a firefighter. By definition, I go to people who are extremely unlucky, or people who are extremely stupid, or people who had a very unlucky or made a really stupid decision that day, because we all make stupid decisions. And it's something to sit at the bedside of somebody who's 30 years old, who's dying of cancer, and they can't breathe, and you've got oxygen on them, but they're on palliative care. They're gonna die. You might be able to extend their life by another couple of days, by another week, but you can't fix them. Nobody can fix them. Or go into car accidents, right? There's a lot of, young people who had their entire lives ahead of them, and now they're just, not to get too graphic, but mangled flesh inside a metal box. Mm-hmm. So it really does put things into perspective. And what do you want to do? What gives your life value and meaning? And that was one of the things that got me off my ass to finally do this trip that I'd been thinking about, this particular trip, for decades. And also makes me really value the time that I have here, and tries to, I'm willing to take some risk to achieve the things that I want to achieve. But where in my life are the risks that are optional, right? If it's really meaningful to you, take the risk. If you really want to fight MMA, okay, fight MMA. Realize what the consequences are, number one, not only of the fighting, but also of the training, right? Brain damage is very real. It's, at this point, you can't pretend that you don't know about CTE. Go watch, there's tons of footage of boxers talking early in their career, and talking lucidly and very eloquently, and then 20 years later, they sound like they're drunk all the time and they're kind of mumbling. So you want to fight MMA? Great. First, watch 20 of these videos. You still want to fight MMA? Okay, cool. I support your right to take risk so long as it doesn't infringe on anybody else. I support your right to drive without a seatbelt, but I don't support your right to drive drunk. If you drive without a seatbelt and you get in a car accident, it's probably going to be much, much worse for you. But that's a decision that you made and falls mostly on your shoulders. If you drive drunk, now you're probably going to hit somebody else who didn't consent to being part of that. So let's talk about risk. Let's talk about being willing to accept risk. And let's talk about mitigating risk. Let's talk about how can you train differently to minimize taking shots to the head, since we're talking the MMA example, minimize taking shots to the head in training, and then minimize taking shots to the head in actual competition. There are some guys who just love to get in there and, okay, I hit you, you hit me, I hit you, you hit me. And maybe they watch too many Rocky movies, right? Where every punch is a haymaker and every punch lands. Yeah. Okay. Your search image, I guess, for combat sports, but there's a price to be paid there. And, there's a whole nother question of whether or not an 18-year-old competing in MMA can give consent for the consequences on his 50-year-old self. That's a whole complicated issue. But at least I support people taking risk so long as that risk doesn't go on other people and so long as that risk is informed. Mm-hmm. If you truly understand what the risks are.
That's such an important thing. For context, my dad is also a black belt. He's 63. And so I've always gotten to see, he started at 48. I've gotten to see somebody go through jiu-jitsu as they are really getting older. And, at 48, there were still a lot of things that he could do with the younger guys, maybe just a little less consistently, but still a lot that he could do with the younger guys. And as he aged, I started to notice, like, man, if he makes a mistake, he pays for that mistake for 6 weeks, and maybe I would pay for that mistake for a day. Maybe, I'd be a little sore or something like that. And you see this in jiu-jitsu, specifically for me, it's with steroid use. And you see it as this thing where people will say, like, oh, well, I don't care if I'm trading my, years of my life later on for winning today. But it's weird. You don't hear guys as they get to their 50s and 60s share that same opinion and say, I'm glad that I traded that time. But the point that you made is, even if you inform someone when they're younger, it seems to be so hard to actually grasp that one day you are going to die. And the mistakes that you make at 18, 20, 25, 30 can greatly affect that even much later in your life. Is, just in your opinion, is there a way to communicate that to the younger generation? You can say specifically the younger generation of jiu-jitsu, but just the younger generation of people, the value of life, and then how hard it is to, as you age, to suffer through aging.
Yeah. I don't think ultimately you can convince people of that fully, but we got to acknowledge that partially informed consent is better than no informed consent at all. And maybe if you know about this thing called CTE, say, chronic traumatic encephalopathy, brain damage from impact, then and you start getting a couple of concussions, maybe you're going to call it a little bit earlier, right? Like, oh man, I can't take a punch like I used to. Maybe I should. And then that talk that your dad gave you about brain damage, you remember that. And then maybe you stop doing impact-based sports or stop getting punched in the head 5 years earlier than you would have. maybe. Some information is better than no information. Partially informed consent is better than no informed consent. I mean, the bottom line is you can't stop young men in particular from doing stupid things. There's a reason that armies consist mostly of men in their late teens and early 20s, because all of a sudden it seems like a really good idea to charge that pillbox and die glory, like, we can take that hill. Wah!
Mm-hmm.
It'd be a lot harder if you had 40-year-olds going, dude, yeah, we could take that hill, but let's just figure out a different way to do this, right? It would be a lot harder to run an army if you had only 40 and 50-year-olds fighting in it, because they would have that, presumably, they had seen a little bit more mortality. I think, talking about this kind of stuff is important. I think also with the steroid use that's rampant, I mean, it's one thing. I've never done steroids. Maybe one day I'll do TRT. I don't know. My medical situation post-transplant is pretty complicated. So, there's just isn't the data on what happens. So currently, for full disclosure, I'm not on anything, never have been. But there's a world of difference between doing it properly, which would be going and getting blood work done, and then talking to an actual doctor, not a homeopath, not your chiropractor, not bro dude at the gym, and then getting on an actual prescription and then actually doing blood work fairly frequently. You're mitigating the risk. Whereas, like, the reality of this is, hey, dude, what's your stack? Because I was looking at the Liver King stack, and this is what he does. And this is what Gordon Ryan, this is what they think that Gordon Ryan's on. Yeah, and I want to be as good as Gordon Ryan, but I'm just going to take twice as much as him.
Then you'll be twice as good, right?
Yeah, be twice as good. Math. Hashtag math. And then, oh shit, man, you're out of, I don't know, what's that steroid name? Nandrolone. You're out of Nandrolone? Yeah, cool. Just take this stuff instead. I got this really good stuff. I don't even fucking know what it's called, but yeah, just inject this much, like with my fingers. Yeah. That's the reality of how most steroid use is done in this sport. It's a bunch of guys getting information from podcasts, podcasters who are not doctors, gym bros who are not doctors, influencers who are not doctors, websites that are written by God knows what, and they're not doing the blood work. This is a story I tell. As I was getting ready for this trip that we're talking about, food is heavy. I took 250 pounds of food, just under 250 pounds of food on that. That's a lot of weight to have in your boat. That's a lot of weight to carry over a portage. It's a pain in the ass. So food, very roughly, dry food, whether it's carbohydrates or protein or sugars, gives you 4 calories for every gram. So fat is twice that. Fat is 8 calories for every gram. So I thought I could cut my food if I brought nothing but fat, hypothetically. I could bring the same number of calories, but my bag would only weigh 125 pounds. Now, of course, you can have some it's not going to work out exactly like that. There will be some carbohydrates, there will be some starch. But even if I could knock 50 pounds off by going, keto, then maybe I could not have to take as much stuff. So what I did right is I went to my doctor and said, I want to try this. I want to try keto. He's like, oh God, not another one. And I said, no, I really want to try it. And here's why. He's like, okay, let's do it properly. We'll go get you some blood work. So I went and did a complete blood panel. Then I went and did hardcore keto for a month, right? We're talking coconut milk for breakfast, eggs, but not too many eggs because there's too much protein in eggs. I wanted to be in ketosis for most of the time. Tons of coconut fat. I hate the diet. So I got along. It felt okay. I didn't have a ton of energy, but maybe that would come later. But I subsisted on this for a month, and I was in ketosis for most of that time. Yay, I did it right. And then I did blood work 30 days later. And in Canada, the blood work comes back pretty quick. A couple hours later, I'm online looking at the blood work going, oh, that's interesting. My HDL, which is good when it's high, had plummeted. My LDL, which is supposed to be low, had gone through the roof. Had gone every single number. Triglycerides were off, ratios were off. Every single number that's correlated to dying earlier had skyrocketed. It was a complete horror show. And I'm sitting there looking at this prediction that you're going to die. And my phone rings. And it's my doctor. It's not my doctor's assistant going, the doctor would like to make an appointment with you next week. Are you available on Tuesday at night? No, it's my doctor going, I'm looking at your blood work. You have to stop. I'm like, I'm looking at my blood work and I've already stopped. So, point being, some people do okay on keto and some people don't. And I guess I'm one of the, anecdotally, it seems like about 1 in 3, 1 in 4 people do terribly on keto. I don't know what the exact numbers are. I want to be clear about that. But I'm one of them. I did it properly. And without that blood work, yeah, my energy levels were a bit low. Not crazy low, just a bit lower. That was the only sign. But atherosclerosis and a heart attack and a stroke were certainly down that road. When people go, I'm really intuitive, I can just feel what my body needs. Screw you. Like, you can't feel high LDL. You can't feel high blood pressure. You feel great when you have high blood pressure. You can't feel high blood sugar unless it's ridiculously high. But you can be cruising around with blood sugar high enough to qualify as diabetes for years before you feel it. And then your fingers and then your toes fall off and you start going blind. So you need data to make these things. And unless you have a background in biology or medicine or physiology, you should probably be dealing with a doctor who specializes in this. Now, I realize it's complicated. Not everybody can get a doctor. Not everybody can afford a doctor. I know. I'm sorry. That's part of the reason that all this quackery exists, because people can't afford, I'm going to say, real health care. So then they end up going to their chiropractor for advice on their liver function, and they end up going to some naturopath on how to treat cancer. And I have a friend who died recently of cancer because he went to a naturopath for stages 1, 2, 3 of his cancer, and then jumped over to the allopathic medicine, otherwise known as medicine that works, for stage 4. I'm opinionated on this subject. I'm probably alienating half your audience. Sorry.
Listen, I alienate half my audience once a week.
Yeah, I remember Dan Carlin, the history podcaster, once said, if I haven't alienated you yet, you just haven't been listening long enough.
Yep, that's about right. That fits me. This episode is brought to you by BJJ Mental Models Premium and a free gift that they have for I Suck at Jiu-Jitsu show listeners. As some of you guys know, I've actually worked for BJJ Mental Models Premium as a coach that reviews jiu-jitsu footage for over a year now. And it's been a ton of fun. It's been a great learning experience. And I've really been able to kind of hone my craft of being sent matches, being sent rolling rounds in the gym, and being able to ideally see something different than what that person realizes is happening in their round. Be able to give them a concept, an idea that will hopefully make jiu-jitsu easier to understand. And if that's interesting to you, you can always sign up for BJJ Mental Models coaching tier and use promo code Josh, and you will get half off your first month. But like I said, they have a free gift for you just for being an I Suck at Jiu-Jitsu show listener. If you go to bjjmentalmodels.com/ISuck, you will find a free course with Rob Bernacki that will help you do exactly what I said that I've been trying to do for my people that I review footage for, which is make jiu-jitsu simpler, make jiu-jitsu easier to understand. How he does that is by breaking jiu-jitsu down into just a few major concepts, including alignment, including base, including structure. And what he does is he gives you some really good examples and some really good ideas of how these concepts are just repetitively happening in every single jiu-jitsu round, in every single jiu-jitsu match, all over the world, no matter where you are. This is what is happening when you are watching grappling. And it gives you this new lens to be able to look through every time you review your own footage or every time you try to problem solve a position. This course is called Jiu-Jitsu for Imbeciles, and it is completely free for I Suck at Jiu-Jitsu show listeners. And so if that is interesting to you, be sure to go to bjmentalmodels.com/I suck, and you will be able to get in on your free course from Rob Bernacki. Let's get back to the episode. This is a very random thought, but it's a question, but it's off of what you just said. What was your first meal post keto?
Ooh,
if you remember.
Post keto.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
No, I don't remember. Probably pasta.
Okay. I've done keto before, and yeah, when you get off of it, nothing tastes better than whatever non-keto thing you're about to eat. You know, it's like you could have a boxed pasta and be like, this is the food of the gods.
Mm-hmm. I will say this. I once went on a winter camping trip when I was really cold for 4 days. It was in the Adirondacks in northern New York State. It was really freezing, which really means I didn't take enough warm clothing. And when I got back, nothing tasted as good as fat. If you had offered me a stick of butter, I would have eaten it. There was a super greasy sausage. I still remember that super greasy sausage and just like, oh, this is delicious. So your metabolism does change when you're in extreme cold. So we have to acknowledge that. And I also remember being on a canoe trip of eating tons and tons of dry pasta. And I started fantasizing about a certain dish. And when I got home, I made that certain dish, and that dish was fresh pasta. So I don't know, wires got crossed there. Must eat different kind of pasta.
It's addicting. That's what it is. Like, maybe I'll do more pasta. So
how did you find keto for you?
You know, I did it a lot more when I was younger, dieting for jiu-jitsu tournaments. It never really worked for me well. Not in a weight loss sense, in a how I feel, and then especially how I performed sense. I seem to perform better when I am just on a more balanced diet. Higher protein, but I do just seem to perform better when I am eating carbs and I am eating fat. But so that was kind of my reason for not doing it anymore, was I just was like, man, this doesn't, I was noticing like a significant decrease in my performance for jiu-jitsu tournaments, in just how I felt before it, how I performed, how many matches I could have before I was like, man, I don't have anything left to give at this tournament. And so for me, it wasn't it.
There is an argument for keto if you're going to be doing tons of like zone 1 cardio. If you're skiing to the North Pole, or if you're an ultra marathoner who's running at 110 beats per minute for hours, heartbeats per minute for hours and hours and hours, then maybe the fat metabolism route has advantages, as long as it doesn't kill you the way it would have me. And that was my logic, because I'd read accounts of polar explorers who'd actually gone to the North Pole and back, and something like 80% of their calories came from fat. Obviously, in a cold environment, the Inuit mostly eat meat, right? Seal and narwhal and fatty fish. So they eat a very meat and fat intensive diet. On the other hand, they've also been in that environment for many thousands of years, and there's going to have been selective pressure for being able to handle that better metabolically. And bottom line is, if you were 50 years old and an Inuit hunter, you probably had a good life, right? We didn't tend to live that much longer. There weren't that many septuagenarian Inuit hunters running around so they didn't have to worry about a heart attack or stroke, because they probably would have died of frostbite or being eaten by a polar bear long before that, or put in an ice floe and sent adrift.
Man, I did not know I'd never heard that about like zone 1 cardio. And that's interesting. I've never heard anyone mention that. It makes sense for me.
When you're competing, you're not anywhere near, you might be in zone 1 between matches, right? You're aroused and your heart rate doesn't know that it's not jogging. Your heart rate feels like boom, 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 boom. But when you're in the thick of it, I think for most people, they're going to mostly be metabolizing sugar. Maybe there's the odd freak out there who can metabolize fat on the fly, or maybe just the. And I'm out speaking outside my area. I should shut up. I'm just saying words that I've heard on podcasts and read in books, but I am not an expert in fat metabolism. That's purely speculation about the zone 1 cardio. It seems that the endurance athletes that I've heard of who've made it work, so 4 of them have been more in the the really low, long hours of zone 1 cardio.
That's really interesting. Yeah, I don't claim to be an expert on anything. I kind of know jiu-jitsu, but I agree on, just sticking with what we know. But I think that there definitely seems, at least anecdotally, I seem like I would agree with what you're saying just from what I have experienced.
It's a hypothesis, right? This is an important thing. I think if people use the phrase, my hypothesis is XYZ, this world would be a better place. My hypothesis is that, I'll pick a really simple one, that the reverse heel hook is more powerful than the standard heel hook. And we know what the answer is to that now. That's been tested and that's been solved. But if that was a hypothesis I explored 25 years ago, right? I wonder if this way of doing it is better than this. I didn't say this is better. My hypothesis is that this is better. My hypothesis is that athletes who do zone 1 cardio are the ones who typically see the most benefits from keto, if they're going to see benefits at all. That's a hypothesis. I am totally willing to be proven wrong by data. I have a hypothesis based on a few studies that on average, bear spray is more effective than firearms. If it's one or the other, against bears. That there is some data out there that suggests that bear spray on average is about 10% more effective than firearms. Both will work against bears. Now, you say that out loud and you get attacked by the Second Amendment crowd. It's nuts. Because I have said that. I've got kind of my jiu-jitsu channels and I've got my outdoor channels. And yeah, that was I really upset some people. Man, I carry both. I own firearms. It's not that I hate firearms. It's just I'm willing to go where the initial data points. And then if there's more data, I will change my mind. I will correct my opinion as more data comes available, with the caveat that it has to be high quality data. I'm willing to change my mind about what works at the highest levels in jiu-jitsu. If we go to a local tournament, though, and there's a whole bunch of people winning by buggy choke, say, we go watch a tournament and 5 of the 10, the most popular submission that day is the buggy choke. Well, yeah, that's some data. But on the other hand, it's from white belts and blue belts. So we got to take that into account. That's low quality data. Now, if people are getting buggy choked left, right, and center in Abu Dhabi or the Mundials or CJI, that's different. Like, those are the best guys in the world. They've all seen buggy chokes. They all know how to defend them. If they still can't defend a buggy choke, okay, now we should really take this super seriously. We should make it our main submission. So we also have to factor in the quality of the data. And, was this tournament sponsored by Big Buggy Choke? We got to look at that. Because, nobody has money like the buggy choke people.
The buggy choke crowd, man, they control society.
So I think, if more of us said, my hypothesis is that XYZ, it implies that your hypothesis can be disproven with more data. So that's my little personal crusade. And I hope that phrasing starts becoming a little bit more widespread.
Man, I completely agree with that. This isn't just a jiu-jitsu problem. This is a problem in society, in my opinion, now. I have a hypothesis that this is a problem in society right now, is that so many people, it's not just that there are so many opinions. There is this social pressure that you have to have an opinion that you're willing to die on with everything. And so often there just isn't enough information. There isn't enough data for me to know right or wrong on this immediately. And even then, I'm just going with what is available right now. I'm just going with what I can see right now. And it's back to that, like, but 4 years ago, you said this. And I'm like, yeah, 4 years ago, I was wrong. And or at least I think I was wrong. And I think that there is just this weird pressure that we have. I really think it's social media based, where everybody has to have an opinion on every single thing. And if you don't, like, it seems to be that people would just rather you choose a side than say, I'm not sure. It's like offensive for people to for you to not be sure. And I love that idea of saying my hypothesis is. I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And also, I don't have an opinion on that topic is also a good thing to say. Trouble is, Joe Rogan saying, I don't have an opinion on that topic, that doesn't go viral. What goes viral is him saying, this is the way it is. And here's some piece of data, here's another piece of data. And like, people like certainty. It's an uncertain world, and people like certainty. Certainty is sexy. And also people saying, I was wrong about that. Like, that's also not sexy. Well, if he was wrong about that, he could be wrong about anything. Yeah. All of us could be wrong about pretty much everything.
Yeah.
Short of the earth being flat, because it's not fucking flat. I don't care how many people in jiu-jitsu think it's flat. Like,
I almost brought that up when you were saying that you were doing your satellite phone over the horizon. Like, guys, are you sure?
No, I've been
Are
looking.
you sure you weren't aiming
looking
at a different satellite? Like, because the Earth is
at the
flat,
ice wall.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, at the ice wall. Yeah, it's I as a lover of geography, I find this, and astronomy, astrology not so much. I find this incredibly dismaying. Here's my hypothesis. I have a hypothesis. I think flat Earth people are either trolls or so completely detached from reality there's no reaching them. Like, they are gone. But I think that the most dangerous conspiracy theory might be the moon landing was faked. And I think the reason is because if you don't know much about, I don't know, radiation, then somebody telling you, well, the Van Allen belts would kill you if you traveled through them. That sounds pretty convincing until you realize you're traveling through the Van Allen belt at 30,000 miles an hour. You can be in them for all of whatever if the time is 10 minutes. That sounds really convincing. And, look at these shadows on the moon. They just don't line up. Well, go out and take a photo of two parallel street lights and see the shadows they cast. Take the photo, look at the shadows on the photo. The shadows of those poles aren't going to line up because you've got distortion from the lens. Like, it's so easy to disprove. But once you accept that the moon landing was faked, well, who had to lie to you to fake the moon landing? NASA had to lie to you. The US government had to lie to you. Really, the Russian Space Agency had to lie to you, or the Chinese Space Agency, the European Space Agency. Pretty much every government on the entire planet is hiding this. And if they're hiding this, then, of course, everything that they say is a lie. Now, of course, governments lie, but they're not all lying in the same direction to hide from you the fact that we landed on the moon. So as an entry, as a gateway drug, I think is an incredibly dangerous thing. So we're really getting off topic now. I'm sorry. But you brought up the ice wall. You baited me.
That was my whole plan with this whole thing.
Yeah.
Do you have off topic completely? Are there any conspiracy?
Because we're not already off topic?
Yeah, I mean, I'm staying on topic here, but are there any conspiracy theories that I always like to get black belts to paint themselves into a box with this question, but are there any conspiracy theories that I'm not saying you think are a 100% true, but are even more than 50 in your mind, if you had to go 50-50 on it, like 51% or more true? Any conspiracy theory like that?
I don't think it's a conspiracy theory. I think it's an extreme likelihood. I think that foreign states, Russia and China especially, but maybe in Canada, India, like in the States, I would guess that Russia and China are pumping the internet full of misinformation and disinformation to break up social cohesion. I think the same two parties are probably doing the same thing in Canada because shit spills over the border. And we're also a large democracy with a lot of resources and part of NATO that could oppose them. And, there might even be the same thing happening from India, just because we have so many Indian expatriates here in Canada. So that's my conspiracy theory. I don't know if that's even conspiratorial enough to be a conspiracy theory, but some people will think I'm off my rocker. I think an awful lot of the division that we see in society now, and a ton of the scientific disinformation and misinformation, has been spread maliciously but on purpose by foreign states and amplified by foreign states. Because if we're at each other's throats, if you and I are not talking anymore because I said mRNA vaccines don't create cancer, and you are convinced because you listened to 4 different podcasts on the topic that mRNA vaccines do create cancer, then we're busy fighting each other. We're not worried about the threat of, I don't know, China or Russia beginning to make massive strides. And if we just become stupider arguing about basic science, how the hell are we going to keep up with China in science, for example? But if we've got half the population believes that the moon landing never happened, that space is fake, that all vaccines are bad, and I don't know, let's continue to cut funding to education, then what are the odds that we produce the next massive breakthrough in whatever the next technology is? AI or nuclear fusion or whatever the killer app is. That these things have consequences. So that's my conspiracy theory.
I like it. That was good. That was that it didn't feel like off the top of your head there. That felt like that's a deep one for you. It felt like.
Yes, I think before I was famous in jiu-jitsu, famous-ish, almost famous in jiu-jitsu, before I was writing books about outdoor stuff, I was a biologist. Got 2 degrees in biology. I've worked as a research biologist. I've done way too much molecular biology and cell biology for my own good. I'm cursed by having done used tons of statistics, understanding experimental design. It's kind of the perfect storm. So I am, I'm not an expert in everything, but I'm pretty good at those things.
So now that I got a good conspiracy out of you, we can go back to the book, because I did have one more question about the book.
Sure.
And this was something that I noticed, is that there were a few names that were quoted multiple times, referenced multiple times. And so I looked up one of them. I ended up finding both of them, but PG Downs and JB Terrell were both quoted multiple times. And as I researched those guys, they took very similar expeditions. And so I have to assume that there was research that you did into those guys, into the expeditions that they took. Was there any, while traveling in their footsteps, was there what was it like to have researched people and that had done the same thing but 100+ years before, and then traveling in their footsteps and experiencing what they probably experienced?
Yeah. It's, well, you mentioned JB Terrell and you mentioned PG Downs. So PG Downs traveled in this rough area in the 1930s, Tyrrell in the late 1800s. Before that, Samuel Hearn in the late 1700s. Before that, thousands of years of native people traveling in this area, right? This is what the route that I followed was an ancient trade route that's not used anymore because you don't go up and hunt the caribou. You don't go up by canoe to go to a trading post anymore. And you don't go and trade with the, to go out onto the tundra to catch the Inuit and then, or to not to catch the Inuit, out into the tundra where the Inuit live to hunt caribou and then come back 500 miles to the south as the bird flies, and probably 800 miles by as the canoe travels. So this route isn't traveled anymore. So by being on that same route, and it really does create a connection with the past. And I was thinking about these people all the time. I was thinking about the hunters. I found some petroglyphs, some rock paintings that, at some point, some Cree hunter or some Cree shaman had painted them on a cliff. And it creates a connection to the past. And there aren't any modern day guidebooks to this area. Nobody's saying go over the hill to the left, but you can find references in books hundreds of years old. There was one rapid I ascended. It was really quite a complex rapid. It involved sneaking up because it was in a canyon, so I couldn't portage very easily. It would have been days to portage around it. It's a big rocky island in the middle, quite steep. And I eventually pieced a route through there by coming up on one side, then ferrying, and then dragging over a rock, and then going up and paddling like mad to get across the other side. And this route had actually previously been described by J.B. Terrell in one of his books that I hadn't read. So I'd been reading his books that had mostly been written about further north. And he did the exact same thing. It's like, damn it, I wish I had read this particular description because that would have saved me a couple hours of trying to figure it out on my own. It's so cool. On another trip, I remember having read J.B. Terrell. I had him with me because this was on a river called the Fond du Lac, where all the written descriptions are going downriver because normal canoeists go downriver. But I was ascending it. I was going upriver. That's a very different set of challenges. And the only written description I had of an upriver trip was written by J.B. Terrell while he was busy surveying that. And he wrote about going underneath a sandstone cliff, and there was an eagle's nest on the right-hand side of the river. And so as I was in that section of the river, I looked up and there was a sandstone cliff, and there, 120 years later, was an eagle's nest. So I maybe they're the descendants, maybe they're the children of 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 the same eagles that were there in the 1890s. And that was so cool that was still there. And it creates a connection to everyone else who's been there. And living that close to the land really makes you feel for how incredibly resourceful and tough the native people would have been. Yeah, I mean, they had more support in the sense that they were usually traveling in groups, and they had a lifetime of knowledge of how to travel in that landscape. On the other hand, I have Gore-Tex, and I have duct tape, and I have things that they didn't have. But, I also had a mosquito net, and for thousands of years, they didn't. And when you get up there, and when a big river in the Arctic can produce 1 billion black flies per kilometer, which is less than a mile, per day, that's a lot of black flies. That's a lot of biting insects that crawl up, take a hunk out of your skin, and fly away, leaving you bleeding. So I had bug net, and those native people didn't. And that one little thing it's actually a pretty big thing. Like, how the hell did they manage this? I mean, they did do some things. They smeared rancid bear grease on their faces. So I would rather take the mosquito net. Thank you very much. I'm pretty sure it probably worked better as well. But it really gives you an appreciation for people who've been there before, and it creates an amazing connection to the past. And sometimes there was a Canadian author called Farley Mowat who wrote about his travels in part of this region as well. And the thing is, he never let the facts get in the way of a good story. You're traveling and he's talking about running rapids, and you're like, there is zero chance that he ran this rapid. Zero. It's not possible. I could be in my tiny little whitewater kayak with a helmet, with elbow pads, with padded gloves, with a face cage, the best life jacket in the world, and I wouldn't shoot myself off of this ledge here to drop down onto this rock. Like, there's zero chance that he ran this in a canoe. But so you trust, but then you verify. Just because somebody's been there before or claims to have been there before, they may have done some myth building along the way, and trust but verify.
I love that. Let me ask you this to finish. If somebody is interested in reading this story and reading your new book, how would they go about it?
Okay. Well, that's a wonderful pitch. Thank you so much. The check is in the mail. It's everywhere. Perseverance, Life and Death in the Subarctic. You can get it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Indigo, wherever you get your books. I went just to the little experiment, got a little tiny bookstore around the corner, and I went on their website and I looked for it, and it popped up. They can order it in, and I mean, I did this before it was available, so presumably they're going to be getting it in. So it really is available everywhere. The audiobook version should be coming out as well, the Kindle book version. So all versions of it should be available everywhere. If you type in my name and you type in book, hopefully you should get there. You might also find the Jiu-Jitsu book that I wrote a couple years ago with Brandon Mullins. So that'd be the only other big book that I've published. That was self-published. This current one is published and being distributed by Simon & Schuster. So it's pretty nice to have a big publisher behind this project.
Man, that's really cool. That's I know that so many authors, that are self-publishing, that to get something published by a big publisher is absolutely huge. So congratulations on that. Thank you for coming on the show and just sharing with us, sharing your perspective. I really enjoyed it. And I can't recommend the book enough. I really did. I told you off camera that it was like reading a book from the show alone, which is one of my favorite shows to watch. But just getting that day by day experience and perspective was really great.
Well, thanks so much, Josh. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, thanks for being on.